About a month ago, when I was doing my long-term planning with Sally, I was looking at this week reading suggested suggested by the lectionary, and since none really inspired me, I decided to preach on the Song of Solomon. I did not have an angle then for my message, but since I have good books in my library, I was not worried. I have to admit that last week's news helped me greatly for this morning. Well, last Sunday was the Gay Pride Festival in Toronto. It was a big celebration. And beside all the politicians and candidates who want to be seen there, except Rob Ford, of course, the visible presence of our moderator and with his collar drew a great deal of attention. As an open gay man who's living with the same partner for more than 20 years, he wanted to send a message and remind everyone that not all Christians stand at the same place on the question of gender and sexuality. And interestingly enough, the following day, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that the chain Hobby Lobby does not have to pay for the prescription of some birth control of their employee because it violates the faith and the religious convictions of the owner of the chain. And when I saw this and read all of this, I said to myself, what a perfect week to preach on the Song of Solomon and human sexuality. And if I offend someone with this, well, I will be on holidays for 4 weeks. So, hey. It's wonderful. In many movies, novels, and even songs, the book of the Song of Solomon is depicted as some sort of torrid, erotica literature hidden from teenagers by Puritan Christians who are just a bunch of hypocrites with their biblical-based morality. You probably have heard more about this biblical text in those contexts than you have heard it in churches these days, because this text appeared only twice over 3 years in the lectionary, and even on those occasions they offer another text from the Old Testament just to be sure, for those who want to avoid it at all cost. And strangely enough, up to the Middle Ages, Christian interpreters and authors wrote more work on this single book than any other of the Old Testament. 12th century monk and theologian Bernard de Clairvaux wrote 86 sermons on the first 2 chapters of this book. 86 sermons on only 2 chapters. That's impressive. But now these days, the reading of the Song of Solomon essentially happens during weddings, if it is read at all. Maybe the unease of many preachers and ministers when it comes to this collection of poems that never mention the word God in all the book, by the way, come from the fact that many do not know what to do with this Song of Solomon and do not know what it is really about. Traditionally, Judaism has understood those songs as the love between God and God's people. This interpretation is mostly based on a very deep analysis of several prophetic books like Jeremiah, Isaiah, Hosea. in which the Lord is presented as the husband and Israel as the bride. And in time, Christians follow this allegoric way of interpreting this Song of Solomon, and the mutual love expressed between the man and the woman is traditionally understood as the relationship between God or Christ and the church, the human soul, or even the Virgin Mary. And yet, unless to be in complete denial, it's very difficult not to see that these poems are about love, about physical love, about sexuality. And I understand that usually people are not very comfortable with this topic in church because the Bible often uses euphemism and metaphors when it comes to human sexuality. In Genesis, for example, Jacob met or went to his wife and she bore a baby. Enough said. Try to understand that when you're young. You know, that's not very explicit. But here, whoa, the cup of love overflows. Whoa, today's passage is about a woman who describes her lover's arrival. She sees and hears her beloved approaching, coming powerfully, swiftly, gracefully like a gazelle. The man's answer is formulated as a plea to escape with him to the countryside, vibrant with the sound and smell of spring. And the man invites the women to come away with him to enjoy the physical desire and delight of each other in conjugal love. I say conjugal love here, but there's no indication anywhere that these two are married or even engaged. But just to make them an honest man and an honest woman, the wide majority of the version of the Bible called them the groom and the bride, so we will respect that. Love and passion permeates this old passage. However, we cannot but notice signs of struggle for the lovers. The man is clearly an outsider. As the verse 9 says, "Look, there he stands behind our wall, gazing at the window, looking through the lattice." The text does not indicate from where the man comes from, but clearly is not part of the extended family or from the same city than the women. The man obviously does not have access to the women's property. It does not seem to fulfill the acceptable condition to be accepted and to be a companion to the woman because he cannot get inside. And because he cannot get inside, he invites her to flee, to elope with him. And this details in today's passage invite us to reflect upon the walls we create in our society when it comes to relationship, when it comes to sexuality. My parent told me that during their youth, a young man or a young woman was not supposed to date and even not marry someone from outside the country or outside the area. And the same could be said about mixed marriages. To be involved with someone outside one's faith or with a different tone of skin was an absolute no-no. Divorcees were at best tolerated in society, and those who were speaking and teaching to women about birth control were highly denigrated. Thank God those realities changed with time, as some of you I know fly across the country for the wedding of their children and grandchildren. We have learned to judge the character of a person on one's merits and not on background or physical appearances. We have come to acknowledge that a divorce is maybe better than a lifelong of misery. There's no more shame anymore at buying birth control at the local pharmacy. And yet, on some occasion, on some topics, it seems that we still struggle after all those years. We do not understand why some people behave the way they do. We do not get that their church make all those decisions about, quote unquote, those people. We difficultly accept all those changes. We're wondering sometimes if there's anything sacred anymore. We're wondering if we have lost our morality and our core values. We want to erect walls between what we consider to be acceptable and what we consider taboo and illicit. We want to be the ones who decide who can come in and who should stay out. But too often, we forget that love is God's gift for creation. It is a blessing to be valued and enjoyed in many different ways and various contexts. It is what binds us together and allow us to care for one another. We will never be able to understand all of God's plan for creation and all God's desire for our world. But we can trust God, and we can trust in God's goodness and God's wisdom. Our personal views and beliefs on the practices and the decisions of our fellow human beings are somehow less relevant than our call to live according to God's realm, which are forgiveness, hospitality, peace, justice, fairness. We need to remember that God knows us and knows what is the way we should follow. The challenge is not to listen to our voices, but to discern God's voices when we are confronted to difficult dilemmas. Change is never easy, especially when it deals with values so engraved like relationship, and it's even more difficult when sexuality is involved in those debates. And very often, some are confronted to this topic. When some are confronted to this topic, the first reflex is to refuse to hear and talk about it, or to claim that is wrong and there's no way I will change my mind about it. However, biblical texts like this morning text from the Song of Solomon challenge our assumptions by depicting a passionate romance between two young lovers who do not seem to accept the restriction imposed upon them. Their love is an inspiration for us who strive for acceptance, who strive for inclusivity. May we be inspired by these words. May we be those who try to bring people together regardless of their difference. May we be those known for tearing down the walls that divide us. Amen.